Hey, welcome back to English Bloom, the podcast where we dig into the fascinating corners of English that nobody's textbook ever got around to explaining properly. I'm Sarah, and if you're new here, hi, genuinely lovely to have you. If you've been here a while, you already know we're not doing boring grammar drills. We're doing real language, the kind people actually speak. Okay, so quick question before we dive in. When was the last time you said something perfectly precise in conversation? Like a friend asks how you're feeling and you say, I'm experiencing a moderate level of fatigue and mild social anxiety, right? Nobody talks like that. Nobody. What do you actually say? You say, I'm kind of tired to be honest, or maybe I'm a bit off today, or my personal favorite, I don't know, sort of in my own head. That's vague, gloriously, strategically vague. And here's the thing. Native speakers do this constantly, on purpose, not because they're uncertain or unsophisticated, because vague language is a tool, a social tool, a politeness tool, a nuance tool, and if you're not using it, you might sound, and I say this with total affection, a little robotic, a little textbook, a little bit like you're reading from a legal document. So today, we are going all in on vague language, what it is, why it exists, how it works socially, and crucially, how you can start using it today to sound genuinely, naturally fluent. Stick around. This one is going to be kind of a big deal. All right, so let's start at the beginning. What exactly is vague language, the technical term? And yes, there is one, is hedging. Linguists use it, teachers occasionally mention it, and then move on way too fast. But hedging is essentially when you soften or approximate what you're saying. You hedge your bets, so to speak. That's actually a great idiom here, hedge your bets, meaning you don't commit completely to one outcome. Now, vague language includes a few different categories, and we're going to work through them today. There are approximators, words like about, around, roughly, kind of, sort of. There are softeners, words like a bit, slightly, somewhat rather. There are vague category markers, phrases like and stuff or whatever, and things like that. And there are placeholder words like thingy, what's it, doohickey, which we'll touch on a bit later because honestly, they're too delightful to skip. But here's the question I want you to sit with for a moment. Why does this exist? Because think about it. If you're speaking a language, surely clarity is the goal, right? Say what you mean what you say. That's what we're taught. And yet, native speakers seem to go out of their way to not be clear. Here's my analogy. Imagine you're painting a picture literally with a brush and canvas. You could paint every single leaf on a tree, every vein, every shade of green, every tiny shadow. Photorealistic, and that would be impressive. But it would also take forever, and for a lot of purposes, it would feel a bit cold, a bit stiff. Or you could paint impressionistically, a few confident strokes, the suggestion of leaves, the feeling of a tree. And somehow that looser version connects more. It breathes. Vague language is the impressionist stroke. It signals something important. I'm not performing precision at you, I'm just talking to you. If you're an advanced learner tuning in, notice how I just used the phrase, performing precision. That's a collocation worth holding on to. When we perform something, we mean we're doing it deliberately, for an audience in a way that draws attention to itself. Performing precision means being unnecessarily exact in a way that feels showy. Good phrase. And this is actually a cultural point too. In English, particularly British and American English, sounding too definitive, too absolute, can come across as arrogant or blunt. It's not just about grammar, it's about social signaling. Vague language says, I'm open to discussion. I'm not claiming I have all the answers. I'm a reasonable person, which in 2025 feels like a pretty radical thing to say. Okay, so let's get practical. Let's look at the three most common pieces of vague language. The holy trinity, if you will, sort of, kind of, a bit. These are the words learners often understand but rarely use correctly or freely enough. And I get it. When you're learning a language, you want to be accurate. You want to say exactly what you mean. Vague language feels like cheating, almost like you're getting away with something, but flip that thought around. Using these words well is actually a sign of fluency. It shows you understand the social register, the level of formality, and the unspoken rules of a conversation. Let's break them down. Sort of, or in spoken English, often shortened to sorta, is used to approximate a category or quality. It means something is close to a thing, but not quite exactly that thing. Example, he's sort of the manager, but not officially. Example, It sort of made me feel sad, but also relieved. It's complicated. Notice in that second example, it's doing real emotional work. I'm not being vague because I don't know how I feel. I'm being vague because the emotion itself is complex. Sort of is giving me breathing room, nuance room. That's actually a really important distinction. Vague language doesn't mean shallow language. Sometimes the most honest thing you can say is, I sort of feel that way, because certainty would be a lie. Now, kind of or kinda in fast speech works similarly, but it tends to soften degree as well as category. It tones things down. Example, that film was kind of brilliant, actually. Wait, interesting, right? Kind of brilliant? Doesn't that weaken the compliment? Technically, yes. But culturally, especially in British English, understating a positive is actually a sign of genuine enthusiasm. If someone says it was kind of brilliant, they probably loved it. If they say it was absolutely the most brilliant thing I've ever seen, you're allowed to be a little skeptical. Lax. This is something called litotes, the technical term for understatement used to emphasize. Not bad meaning excellent, kind of impressive meaning I'm genuinely amazed. English is delightfully contradictory like that. And then there's a bit, the great workhorse of British English in particular.
That's a bit much. It's way too much. He's a bit of a character. He's kind of chaotic. Could you turn that down a bit? Please, for the love of all that is quiet, turn that down. A bit is brilliant because it softens requests, criticisms, observations, basically anything that might land too hard without it. It's a linguistic cushion. And here's the beautiful thing. You can stack these. It's kind of a bit strange. Totally natural, totally fluent. Two hedges stacked on each other for maximum softening. Linguists call this hedging accumulation, and once you start noticing it, you hear it everywhere.
Now, I want to go a level deeper, because there's something genuinely fascinating happening with vague language beyond just sounding casual. Vague language is a politeness strategy. There's this whole field called politeness theory developed by linguists Penelope Brown and Stephen Levinson in the 1980s, and one of their core ideas is that we're constantly managing each other's sense of autonomy and dignity in conversation. They call it face, your social self-image, your sense of being respected. Vague language protects face, both yours and the other person's. Think about it. If I tell you your idea is wrong, that's a direct face threat. It's aggressive. But if I say, that's kind of tricky to execute, isn't it? I've communicated the same thing, but left you space to agree, to save face, to pivot without embarrassment. This becomes especially interesting in professional contexts. Actually, I'll share something from my own experience. Because I think this is relatable, a few years ago I was in a work meeting, my boss had this plan, and honestly, it was a bit of a disaster waiting to happen. But she was excited about it, and I had to respond. So I didn't say, this plan will fail. I said, I think there might be a few areas worth exploring a bit further before we commit. Same message, completely different social impact. And you know what? She actually welcomed it. We refined the plan. It went well. And I didn't torpedo a working relationship in the process. That's vague language as professional intelligence, as emotional intelligence, even. If you're a B1 or B2 learner, I want to be direct with you here. This might be the single most useful thing you'll take from this episode. Because in professional settings in English, especially in international teams, being too blunt, too precise, too direct can be misread as rudeness, arrogance, or a lack of social awareness. Vague language isn't weak. It's strategically graceful. On the other hand, and I do want to be balanced here, there are contexts where vagueness backfires. If someone asks you for the deadline and you say, oh, sort of around the end of the month-ish, that's not graceful. That's evasive. That's frustrating. Context is everything. The skill isn't just knowing the words, it's knowing when precision matters and when softness serves. All right, let's have some fun now, because this next section is one of my favorites, vague category markers. These are the phrases that native speakers use to gesture at a category without listing every single item in it. Things like, and stuff like that, or whatever, and things, and so on and so forth. You know, that kind of thing. Now, to a learner, these can seem almost lazy, like the speaker ran out of words, but that's not what's happening at all. What these phrases actually communicate is, you're intelligent. I don't need to list everything. You can fill in the gaps. It's a compliment to the listener. It says, we're on the same page, we share a context. We're both adults who've been to a supermarket, sat through a long meeting, experienced an awkward family dinner, so I don't need to enumerate every detail. And stuff does it all in one word. Language is so efficient when it's allowed to be, and then there are placeholder words. Oh, these are wonderful. These are the words native speakers use when they can't immediately recall the precise word they want, or when the precise word doesn't matter. Could you pass me the thingy? It's the what's it on the shelf, you know, the doohickey? I left it on the thingamajig. Thingamajig, a real word. Completely absurd. Completely fluent. Now, and this is a genuinely advanced point, using placeholder words fluently requires a kind of confidence that learners often lack, because when you're still building your vocabulary, the last thing you want to do is say thingy when you're not sure if you're allowed to. You might feel like you're revealing a gap. But here's the reframe. Using placeholders like thingy or what's it fluently actually signals comfort with the language. It says, I know English well enough to know when I don't need to be precise. That's a high-level skill, so try it. Next time you forget a word, and you will, we all do, don't freeze, don't apologize, just say the thingy gesture vaguely, and let context do the work. Lax. 9 times out of 10, it works. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today. Let me bring it together with something really practical. I want to give you a little exercise, a kind of mental A/B test you can run in your own head before you speak. Imagine you're meeting someone at a party, and they ask, what do you do for work? Version A, the textbook answer, I am a software developer specializing in machine learning infrastructure for a financial technology company. Version B, the natural answer, I'm kind of in tech, software stuff, mostly AI adjacent, which sounds more exciting than it is. Now, version A is more precise, technically, but version B does several things at once. It hedges, kind of. It uses a vague category marker, software stuff. It uses an approximator, AI adjacent, and then it self-deprecates to signal warmth and humility. Which one opens a conversation? Version B, every time. And here's the deeper point. Fluency isn't just about accuracy. It's about connection. Language is fundamentally a social act. Vague language is one of the tools that makes conversation feel like a conversation rather than a report. Building on that, here's what I'd suggest as a practice habit. Start noticing vague language in the English you consume, in podcasts, in films, in conversations. Every time you hear kind of, ask yourself, what is the speaker softening? What social work is that phrase doing? Is it protecting face, building rapport, expressing genuine uncertainty? Because once you can analyze it, you can reproduce it. And once you can reproduce it, it starts becoming instinct. That's how fluency actually works. Not from memorizing lists, from absorbing patterns until they feel like yours. One more thing before we wrap up, and this is a note specifically for my C1 and C2 listeners. There's a related concept in academic and professional writing called epistemic hedging. It's the written equivalent of what we've been talking about. Phrases like, it could be argued that this would suggest, the evidence somewhat supports. In academic writing, this isn't vagueness, it's intellectual honesty. It shows you understand the limits of evidence. If you're writing essays or research papers in English, building this into your style will genuinely elevate your writing worth looking up. All right, let's land this plane. Here are your key takeaways from today. Think of these as your little linguistic toolkit to carry into the week. 1. Vague language is intentional. It's not lazy, it's socially intelligent. When native speakers say sort of or a bit, they're doing real communicative work. 2. The big 3, sort of, kind of, a bit, soften degree, approximate categories, and protect both speakers' dignity in conversation. 3. Vague category markers and stuff or whatever and things signal shared context and trust the listener's intelligence. 4. Placeholders words thingy, what's it, doohickey are signs of confident fluency, not vocabulary gaps. 5. Context matters. Vagueness is powerful in social and professional conversation. It can backfire in high-stakes, precision-required situations. Read the room. Now, I want to ask you something this week. I want you to try using one piece of vague language you don't usually use. Could be sort of, could be a bit, could be a brave and stuff like that. And then, and this is the fun part, notice how the person you're talking to responds. Does the conversation feel more fluid? Does it open up? I genuinely love to hear about it. Find me on Instagram English Bloom or drop a message on our community Discord. The link is always in the description. Coming up in the next episode, we're diving into what I'm calling the art of the understatement. Because if vague language is the impressionist painting, British understatement is the entire abstract art movement. We'll look at phrases like not ideal, a tad unfortunate, one might argue, and why they're actually the most expressive sentences in the English language when you know how to read them. That one is going to be sort of unmissable. If today's episode helped you even a little bit, and I hope it did more than a little bit, please do share it with a friend who's on their own English journey. Leave a review if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It genuinely helps the show reach more people who need it. And most importantly, keep going. Language learning is one of those things that feels slow until suddenly one day it doesn't. You'll be mid-conversation and you'll drop a perfectly timed kind of without even thinking about it. And you'll realize quietly, privately, wonderfully that you've got this. Take care of yourselves, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next one.